Hi, it's Andy here again. This is another video in my occasional series which I'm calling the Millennium Years. So basically tracking 10 years which straddle the millennium, which produced some great records. But also was quite pivotal time in my own life, with lots of change year on year going on during this time. And we're about halfway now, so this is episode 5, and we've reached 1997. And 1997 was an absolute cracking year. I've got quite a lot of records here. Now look, we're talking about the 90s, so it's not all vinyl. There's a mix of vinyl and CD, and obviously all the stuff I bought at the time and soon afterwards was on CD, but since then I've sort of added vinyl where I've come across it for some reason. So I'm showcasing a mix of these. Now it's taken me quite a while to do this one. I intended to do it a couple of weeks ago, so this is slightly more occasional than I intended. But I've got so many records from here, and I was sort of struggling to cut it down to 10. And I've ended up listening to every one of them. So my listening over really the last 2 or 3 weeks has been almost entirely 1997. But I've cut it down to 11. So I've got an equal number 10. The other reason that it's taken me a while was I couldn't decide on the number 1 and the number 2. I basically kept on umming and ahhing. Anyway, I've come to the conclusion that I like them both equally. So I will be bringing those last two, and they're both in vinyl because they're two of my favourite records ever. A great year for debuts as well, and we'll be going through quite a few debuts. Anyway, there were four records I've got, or CDs I've got, which didn't make the cuts. Two are okay, they just didn't make the cut, and 2 are truly abysmal in my humble. So the ones which very quickly didn't make the cut was Supergrass, In It For The Money, which isn't bad actually, I like that. Similarly, Heavy Soul by Paul Weller is a decent record. 2 truly abysmal ones in my humble opinion: Mosley Colour Scenes, Marching Already, and Oasis, Be Here Now. They should have stopped after the previous one. So let's get cracking on my joint number 10s, and two dance acts, very different dance acts. But to start off, we've got a debut. And it's Daft Punk's debut, Homework. And indeed, while I was going through all of these, Daft Punk were playing in my house. And this is, it's a decent debut. I don't think it's one of their best, to be fair, but it's got some very good tracks on it. It's a very full album, 16 tracks on there in total. Includes some of their classics. So, for example, Round the World, Phoenix. Good album, and we go from that to a very different dance act, and this is really would be in the sort of the heavy metal end, shall we say, of dance music, and I'm talking about the Prodigy and Fat of the Land. So they've been around a little while by the time 97 came along and they produced this, but it's undoubtedly their best album and their biggest selling album, and it had a few tracks which made the charts in the UK, one of which was banned because of the title, but still made the charts. So we got Firestarter on here, Breathe, and unfortunately titled Smack My Bitch Up. But it's overall it's a very good album if you like that sort of thing, and I do. On to number 9, another CD, and this is, in reality, it's a debut, and it's Grandaddy, Under the Western Freeway. So this is the first album which Jason Little, who is AKA Grandaddy, actually released through a label internationally in reasonable numbers. I think he'd done a couple of sort of self-release, low-volume, limited stuff earlier, but this is his first proper one, and it sort of kicks off a run of 3 or 4 really good albums. This, I think, is the weakest of them, but it's still a decent record. It's got AM 180, the title track, Under the Western Freeway, and it's just got that sort of. It's got a great slightly whimsical, languid voice, which I really like. And I like the picture on the back. You can see that he's sort of like doing a jump on a moped, and that sort of rather sums up Jason Little. I think he's not exactly a bike. You know, he's not a rock and roll biker. He's much more gentle than that. We come to our first piece of vinyl, and I'm talking about Sigur Ross and their album Fon, or Von or Fon, which again is their debut. So here, this is yet another debut, but also one of three post-rock or important bands, post-rock bands, produced debuts. So I've left it in its wrapper, but it's the picture is the slightly sinister looking alien baby, and this, I was pleased with this one. I only got it a couple month or two ago. One I've been on the lookout for a while, popped up in Discogs at what I thought was a reasonable price, advertised as near mint, both the sleeve and the media. But it was a good seller, because when he got it out, he contacted me to say that the sleeve, there is a slight tear on the top of it, and so it's not truly near mint, though the vinyl is. So he knocked $7.50 off. So I've ended up with this double album on heavy vinyl with a CD included in it. And for well under 20 quid on Discogs, and the vinyl was indeed near mint. So it's not my favourite Sigur Ross album, to be fair. It's a decent debut, but what it does do is begin to show where they are heading. So you can start to see retrospectively from their next two albums, which are my favourites, and we'll be coming to those in later episodes on this series. You can start to see how they were sort of beginning to go in that direction on this first debut. So that's that one. And back to a CD. And now we've got the Verve and their classic album, Urban Hymns. So the Verve were, I think this is something of a sort of comeback album. They'd split up. I think they'd had lots of arguments in the bands, and they'd split up and reformed and split up and reformed. And this was after one of their reformations, shall we say. And they produced this classic. It's a true all-killer album. It's got some of their famous tracks on there: Bittersweet Symphony, Sonnet, The Drugs Don't Work, Lucky Man, etc., etc. So really classic one. I've never had it's one I ought to keep a lookout for a vinyl copy, because it's a great record. It's one I don't, the CD's tucked away and I don't listen to it enough, so I think I'm going to keep my eye out for a vinyl copy of that, because it's a cracker. And where are we next? Oh, so another vinyl one. And it is Spiritualized, and Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space. And I love that. It's very possibly my favourite title of an LP ever. I just love it. I was thinking it ought to be announced by Nigel from the Young Ones, man, somehow. And it is sort of like space rock. I did not in '97, but sort of around the turn of the millennium. I remember buying the CD of this. I just can't find it anywhere. I've been looking for it for a couple of years, and I came across this vinyl reissue, and it's at a reasonable price online a few months ago. So I went for it, and it's actually. The cover is very different from what you might remember of what I call the spirograph sort of overlapping circles of the CD. The CD I had was a reissue CD, and it was just in a standard, because I've lost it somewhere. I can't remember whether it was in cardboard or just a crystal case, but it wasn't a full packaging. The original case, and they've got photos of them putting it together here, was sort of issued in a box, like as if it was a prescription drug, and it, including this is from the original packaging apparently, and it had the leaflet on there, a sort of facsimile leaflet as if that you get in packs of prescription drugs, and I think that had all the credits and the words on it. So interesting album. For many, it's one of the best albums of the whole 90s. It always appears way up there. For me, it's sort of halfway through my 97, so I love the album, as I say, because I'd lost it and I forked out for a vinyl copy, and I'm glad I did, because I played it again a few times in the last month and really enjoy it. But this is such a good year; it doesn't quite get to the top for me. So it's a double standard vinyl. So there we are. We're halfway through there, 96, and usually at this stage, I just pick up a little bit on sort of what was going on in my life. And in I think I talked about 96 having got a new job focusing on marketing in the industry. I won't go into bore you with the details of that. Walked straight into a merger, jobs up in the air, and all the rest of it. Anyway, finally in 97. Fully, focusing on that. Probably one of the most enjoyable years, really getting a new team together, really focusing on a post-merger communications. Really interesting time. I started to study for the marketing exams this year as well. So learning on the job and learning properly. Relocated the family, so we all moved up from Birmingham to Macclesfield. So second period living in Macclesfield, which if you don't know the geography, is a sort of town south of Manchester in Cheshire, which is sort of commutable into there. So there we go. I'll move rapidly on, and my number 5, just checking my notes, is another vinyl and another debut. And this is one I won't dwell too much on this, because I've talked about it before, but it's the debut from Canada's Godspeed Black Emperor. You can't really see it on here, it's embossed in there, and it's F sharp, A sharp, infinity, so like the infinity symbol of like an 8 on its side. I assume the hash things are actually the sharp symbol, because there wasn't a lot of social media around then. I'm not sure hashtags had been invented as such. It's such a hard album to name. The F-A Infinity, I always call it Fuck All Forever. 2 sides on it. It's probably the most dystopian, bleak album I have ever heard. It formed part of the soundtrack to Danny Boyle's zombie flick, 28 Days Later. The band, it's a weird name as well, Godspeed You Black Emperor. It is actually a reference, or it's sort of named after a Japanese documentary about a Tokyo biker gang called the Black Emperors. So I don't know why they call themselves after that, but it's a great album, fabulous album. And very, they hail from Montreal, and it's really very opaque. You don't really get any help on it. So as I say, there's 2 sides. One side, the tracks are named. Each one has 3 words, like bleak is actually one of them, but you don't know. You can only tell by squinting at the run out, but they're better known by the Dead Flag Blues and East Hastings, which apparently is a name of a street in Vancouver. Anyway, I've rabbited on enough about that. So where do we go from here? Back to another CD. So I'm at number 4 now, and this is Portishead's eponymous second record, Portishead. this is one which I sort of lifted up. I originally had this and the next one below Godspeed You, but having listened to them again, I'd forgotten just how good this is. It's very, very, very close to their debut, Dummy, and you put the two together, and they could, even though they were done separately, they could be a double album. They are, and Beth Gibbons' voice is just, I use this term quite often, I know, but achingly beautiful, and it's got great tracks on it. It's another all killer. Cowboys, Humming, Only You was a classic. Beautiful, beautiful record. Another one which I ought to get on vinyl. I will keep my eyes open, see if I can get it at a reasonable price. And to number 3, and this is one which I lifted right up, having listened to it again for the first time in years, to be honest. I'd forgotten just how good it is. And I'm talking, it's another eponymous, I'm talking about Blur's album, Blur, which came out then. And this is, the best way I can describe it is if the previous albums had been sort of mostly influenced by Damon Albarn's pop sensibilities, this one is where they gave free rein to Graham Coxon to showcase his rock, because Graham is much more of a rocker than a rock man than a pop man. Some great tracks on here. Beetlebum, Song 2, great name, Song 2. It's the second song on the record, and it lasts for precisely 2 minutes. You've got MOR, theme from Retro, Death of a Party, Chinese Bombs, Essex Dogs. It's just, the whole album's really good. I've been looking for vinyl for this. They're ridiculously expensive, so I'll probably just hang on and wait for it for its next reissue, which you're going to get sometime, isn't it? I imagine in the next one, maybe in 2027, maybe 4 years' time. We'll see. So on to my joint number ones, which I couldn't decide on, both vinyl. My first joint number one is another debut, another post-rock debut, and it's Mogwai's Young Team. My favourite of their albums, and I think on balance my favourite post-rock album of all. Such a great album. It's this was a relatively recent reissue this year. I've been looking around for a vinyl copy of this one, the first one and the second one, Come On Die Young, and then they reissued both of them back in February, so I grabbed very quickly. Perfect, if you like this sort of music, not everyone does, but you've got, Like Herod is a classic, and it finishes on very possibly my favourite post-rock track of all, Mogwai Fear Satan, and that's brilliant. I'll post a link to one of their YouTube live recordings of this, because if you don't know it, it's well worth watching, because they're a great live band, and it's resplendent. This one was in a very nice shade of blue, a sort of sky blue colour, double, of course. Great album, and number one, and if you've been waiting for this one, probably no surprises. It is OK Computer by Radiohead. As I say, I'm very different from the Mogwai one. I mean, this is, not only one of the best albums of '97, it's one of the best albums ever by any band. And obviously, I had that, at the time when it came out on CD. This is their 20th anniversary, issued in 2017. It's a triple with sort of various tracks which didn't make the cut on the original. So there's not very much I need to say about OK Computer, 'cause everyone knows it. There's the vinyl, 3 of them. So there we go. what a year 97 was for me anyway. It was a year of it was change and consolidation, but discovering some absolutely great new music. Now, I didn't discover all of this in 97, but a fair amount of it I did. You know, it's a year which has really stood the test of time, you know, and going back now, we've got two of the albums on the post-rock albums on here always appear in the sort of list of top 10 post-rock albums, you know, ever in Young Teams and F sharp, A sharp, Infinity. Next time, 98, I can think off the top of my head of a few great albums from that year. I'd need to do the research, so it's occasional, and I'll do this next one in a few weeks. Thanks for watching again. Cheers.